You're now listening to Alpha Leak, a podcast mini-series highlighting the most under-the-radar projects and developments in crypto. And this series is brought to you by the BlockCrunch podcast. I'm your host, Jason Choi. I'm a general partner at Spartan Capital and an active DeFi angel investor. Nothing on this show should be construed as financial advice, and my guests, myself, and my employer may hold positions in assets discussed on the show. And if you'd like for your project to be featured on this series, reach out to me on Twitter at Mr. Jason Choi. This episode is also brought to you by PARASWAP. Stick around to learn more. This episode is also sponsored by the HBAR Foundation. This episode is also brought to you by notional.finance. I like to use notional.finance to get transparent, fixed-rate borrowing and lending on Ethereum. The upgraded and easy-to-use V2 with token and liquidity mining is also live now at notional.finance/blockcrunch. So stick around to learn more. All right, I'm super excited this week to have Philipp Zentner, CEO and founder of Li.Finance, on the show to talk to us about cross-chain scaling and layer 2s and crypto in general. So Philipp, welcome to the show.
Hey Jason, thank you for having me. I'm really happy and I'm a little excited. This is my very first podcast, so looking forward to this next hour.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be your kind of first podcast host as well. So I'll make sure to make this as fun as possible. And before we jump into Li.Finance and what you're building right now, can you just walk us through a little bit about your background? What got you into this space?
Yeah, sure. So it's not been too long, to be honest. So maybe a little bit on me, and then also on Max, who's my co-founder. Max and I, we both have been starting with software developments, particular web development when we were like 12 years old, 12, 13. I was very early on the entrepreneurial track and starting companies. I was always very fascinated by network effects and network effect-based businesses. Then social media came up. I was kind of always on that track. When I was 22, I met Max. Max spent the very same time just building stuff and tried out different technologies. So he's much more technical than I am, in the sense that he's really agnostic. So he can build an app today, a machine learning model tomorrow. He's very flexible. And then we started working on a software as a service company called Stomp. It was a feedback solution for the gaming industry where we gained a lot of knowledge about building SDKs and integrations. So we integrated into around 20 to 30 ecosystems, including game engines, Unity, Unreal Game Maker, and whatsoever, and building APIs. And we did that for 6 years, bootstrapping. We just raised a really small business angel round at one point. And after that, we tried out different things in marketplace intelligence and biotech. So we have been working together for 8, 9 years now. So it's been a long relationship in that sense. And beginning of this year, like right in January, February, we started a NFT project with a befriended YouTuber. And that got us into crypto. And it took us a week to go from, well, that's my first dip into crypto, to, all right, let's do that full time. And we quickly won 3-4 hackathons in a row, like over 100K in prize money, and on top of that, some grants. So it was sustainable for us from day one, so to say, and people really like what we built. And then we quickly found, or we met the Connects team, and quite early on, we had the chance to have a really objective perspective on that whole blockchain ecosystem, not just Ethereum. And we saw liquidity fragmenting, bridges being built. And so the idea to Li.Finance was born.
Got it. And speaking of Connects, I know you guys have a really great relationship there. And before we dive into, how Li.Finance relates to Connects, can you tell us just what Li.Finance is, what is the core concept, and what was it about the opportunity that drew you to this idea specifically?
Yes. So I think this it was when we entered the space. I sat down with a friend of mine who's been in crypto for many years, and he did a great job in onboarding me. And we went through the CoinGecko list and discussed all these different protocols and layers. So I learned about layer 1s and layer 2s and what's relevant, what's not. And so for me, at some point, it was kind of clear that the future will be multi-chain. I do believe there will be a power law, so maybe 70 to 80% might be processed by Ethereum. But on top of that, there will be application-specific blockchains, private blockchains. There will be enterprise and application specific blockchains. Yeah, I do believe that at least for the next 10 years, there will not be a clear winner, and or let's say there might be a clear winner, but there will be multiple ones, and liquidity needs to be bridged across these chains. It was pretty clear that we need bridges, and when we entered the space, we the second hackathon we joined was scaling Ethereum, where we met the Connects team, and we thought like, well, that makes sense. And then we took some time to do some market research and found several other bridging projects. By now, we have been counting to around 50 bridging projects, and for us as a developer, it sounds like a huge dependency hell. And we've been there before. We have been in Web 2.0. We have seen how that ecosystem changed back then, from reinventing the wheel over and over again, building your own stuff, to outsourcing more and more to third-party providers and aggregation services. And yeah, if you build a software as a service today, you're basically just putting together a bunch of APIs, right? And for us, that was like the point where we said we need to aggregate these bridges due to several reasons. I'm happy to dive into that.
Yeah, and I'd love to understand. So now, obviously, in the past year or so, there has been a lot of bridges that came around, and people start to realize the importance of cross-chain bridging. Um, and I guess why did you decide to aggregate the bridges versus kind of building another bridge?
Because to build a bridge is really hard, right? You really need a lot of experience on blockchain level. You need to understand trust assumptions, attack vectors. And if you take the team of Connects, for example, they've been working for years. I think they've been working on Plasma already, and then they've started working on a state channel approach. And even after spending months on building a state channel protocol, they trashed it and decided to build NXTP, which is the current version, and which is completely trustless and on-chain. And this alone shows how complicated these things are. The state channel approach offered great flexibility, but it was simply not robust, right? And that's a learning curve. And I wouldn't, it would just be too much to build your own bridge. And there are plenty of smart minds that are doing that. So we are focusing on aggregation, because what we also see is that implementing a bridge is quite risky for now, while at the very same time, it's a clear competitive advantage, right? If you can offer a much more seamless user journey than your competition, you might win, right? You might have increased conversion rates, and people will just like it's very easy for now, I figured, to be better or to provide a better user experience than others. And implementing a bridge is kind of a no-brainer if you want to allow your users who have their funds spread across multiple chains by now, BSC, Polygon, Arbitrum. It's fragmenting more and more. So making it easy for these people to flexibly move their funds from anywhere directly into your destination contract on your destination chain, that's a no-brainer. That's an easy competitive advantage. And yeah, bridges are competing on liquidity level. They are competing on feature and application level. They also compete on availability. Some are focusing on EVM-based chains. Some are more towards leaning more towards BTC or other layer ones like Solana, Terra. So yeah, it just makes sense to aggregate these bridges, and then and that's all. Now we come to the second point. Max and I, we are experienced when it comes to data processing. We have done that with genetical information in the past when we had these biotech things. We did a RNA sequence analysis software as a service, and we also did something in neoantigen prediction. So for that, you need a lot of computing power, a lot of data processing. And at the very same time, when we did marketplace intelligence, we also had billions of data points we needed to analyze. So we know how to build architecture around that, and figuring out the best routes across all DEXs, DEX aggregators, and bridges. This is just something we felt like this is the perfect match for us.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm also curious, in terms of how it works. So you're bridging it, you're aggregating all these bridges. So for me as a user, if I send over a transaction, how does Li.Finance know which bridge to use? Like what happens behind the scenes?
Yes, so multiple things actually. So maybe let's start first with what we do. We aggregate all these bridges. That means we abstract away and unify the communication to the bridges, but we are also connecting them to DEXs and DEX aggregators on each chain. So we allow cross-chain swaps, but also on-chain swaps and a combination of both. Um, that's necessary to facilitate cross-chain any-to-any swaps. And on our backend side, we do multiple things. We keep track of the bridge's liquidity pools. We ask them if a certain swap is possible. If not, we split transactions. We also have each bridge graded by their security. That means we make sure that we put some. So we have qualitative and quantitative factors on how to prioritize a certain bridge. Quantitative could be speed, costs, gas costs, like what are the fees, how long does it take, and some other qualitative are simply us doing hardcore research on the bridges and be like, all right, these are the trust assumptions, these are potential attack vectors, and all of these things. And that way we grade bridges, and our algorithm tries to respect that. And we have like kind of a prioritization pattern, which is security over speed over costs, because we think security should be at the first position. Then user experience, like people are willing to pay for user experience, they're willing to pay for speed. So this is why we put cost less. But for anyone who's integrating us, he can change that prioritization pattern. He can be like, all right, I trust these bridges and I blacklist the ones I don't like, and therefore make it please fast and cheap and put security least.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you guys are in a unique position to really comment on the different bridge designs. So we're going to get into that later. But before that, just looking at the market opportunity, what would you say are the main use cases for these cross-chain transactions today? Like, is there a specific type of, is there a specific reason why most people are using bridges today, or is it a very diverse set of reasons?
It's quite early, and I think bridges are still figuring that out by themselves. For me, it's kind of the wallets that want to that are competing on feature level. They want to allow their users to quickly swap back and forth, and they are the main entry point for any dApp. Then I see new dApps that are deploying on layer twos, for example. They have a heavy interest in implementing a bridge so that's easier and faster for users on layer ones to come over. And especially, let's say, I would say right now, dApps that are launching on Arbitrum, they are heavily incentivized to implement a bridge and get the users that have been aping on BSC or Polygon. But then again, if you implement Connects or Hop, there are continuous liquidity problems. So by integrating us, you can have both, and we seamlessly make the decision for you which bridge to use, right? Also, C-Bridge, like there you have a third fallback solution for the very same bridges.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense because there's so many bridges out there. Even for me as a crypto native, it's hard sometimes to keep track of dozens and dozens of bridges, and hard to know which one is the best. So I think an aggregator for bridges makes a lot of sense. On that note, what would you say is the main type of user or main profile of user today that's dying to use something like Li.Finance? Is it the kind of on-chain degen ape, or what type of user is it?
So it's hard to tell. So based on the traffic we are getting and based on the swap sizes I'm seeing right now, it's mainly degens or just users that aim to jump on new protocols on other farms. Right now, it's somehow everybody. Right now, it's hard to say who's not. I think it's a better question. Who's not? Like everyone is curious to try out especially optimistic roll-ups, being amazed by their speed, and optimism is still very exclusive, and so on. So right now, almost everyone is very interested and curious. The question is mainly if it is too early for businesses to make a cross-chain move, and you can go into two ways, and it depends on your dApp, on your protocol. For some protocols, it makes sense to go cross-chain by redeploying, for example, a DEX aggregator. They would have to redeploy their DEX aggregation protocol on another chain and start aggregating DEXs over there, right? And then for some, it's just about being able to get their users from everywhere. And yeah, it's too early. So right now it's very consumer driven, and then I think for any dApp that is facing competition, dApps that are facing competition that want to improve their user journey, for them it's the best use case to implement a bridge or bridge aggregator.
That makes a lot of sense. And there's this one interesting point that came up in a recent discussion with actually another founder of a layer two protocol, and the point he made was that in the future, bridges may actually not be great businesses because people will just onboard onto one chain, but then he doesn't really see a strong use case for constant transactions between chains. So he just thinks, oh, people will probably just bridge over to say Avalanche, but then they won't really have a reason to bridge back. So what do you think about that? Will users transact frequently across chains in the future, or is it more likely for them to say bridge once and then go to the chain that they like and then kind of just stay there?
I see that differently.
Mm.
If let's take a step back. Think of Web 2.0. If you have an online shop and you're implementing Stripe, you don't care how Stripe moves your funds from your credit card from one bank to the other. You don't care how many payment processing providers, so-called PSPs, are being used in the back end. And like in the future, no user will care on which blockchain you are right now. Like you might notice, you might see that logo somewhere in your wallet, and you might be like, all right, so this game is on Solana because it's faster, and this is on I don't know, Starknet because it deals with NFTs and uh, like I don't. In the future, I see this whole blockchain ecosystem and DeFi infrastructure. I see that abstracted away. Like you go on a dApp. Like if you go on a dApp right now, you're just entering a domain, and it will be like the Web 2.0 in that sense. Just that your entry point is a unique authentication interface, and that's your wallet. Like this is what they all going to have in common. They're all going to have in common that you are entering these dApps with a wallet. But apart from that, you don't care on which chain, and you shouldn't care. Like it shouldn't be your concern on which blockchain a dApp is deployed. So bridges will be part of that crucial infrastructure, and these bridges will be used by dApps that need or want to be available cross-chain, that to want to allow the users to let their liquidity flow across chains. And I think we are very early still, and there is so much room for bridges, bridge aggregators, and anything in between on top. And we still see new bridges coming up with unique approaches and unique, or let's say, with a specialization for certain things. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, and from what you're saying, it sounds like the approach that you guys might take is actually more of a B2B approach, where you talk to dApps and you plug into their backends, and the dApps will use Li.Finance in the background, and people won't even know it's being used. Or, you know,
Absolutely.
and do you see a path for a more user kind of B2C approach as well, the same way that a lot of these DEX aggregators, for instance, like 1inch or PARASWAP, are very much B2C focused?
Many bridges are taking that B2C approach, and many bridge aggregators are also doing that. And it's a low-hanging fruit. It's easy to spin up volume doing that for now. And it might be a short-term focus. We think very long-term. For us, it's a B2B game, ultimately. And we might spin off a small B2C-oriented thing, just to capture some value and maybe to have like a use case we are building ourselves on top of Li.Finance, just to have that perfect use case made for users. But actually, we don't aim to compete with other B2C solutions. It's Max and I, we have tons of years with venture building now, and especially as we've bootstrapped, we had yeah, we did all of it, so to say. So focus is everything. I think it's very important to focus. As soon as you defocus in any way, as soon as you want to do too much, like your messaging is diluting across the board, no matter what you do on any communication channel, on any like in your task management, in your knowledge management, whatever you do, your acting is diluting, and that's dangerous. It's energy draining, and ultimately it will get you to the point where you say, oh, we can't do that anymore. We need to stop doing this. We need to stop doing this and free ourselves from doing X. We have been there, and we will probably get there again, because it hits you at some point that you need to again get back to the roots and stay. Like we always have to pull off effort into staying focused, but we can already say upfront that or we can already do a lot from the very beginning to stay focused. So no, for us it's B2B, and the fact that our current landing page doesn't reflect that is simply that Li.Finance, the website right now, is simply the result of the Hack Money hackathon we did and won. And it was, we don't have time right now to put much energy into that. We had the Connects team to build X-Pollinate, and apart from that, we're now just focusing on getting a new landing page, getting our API, SDK, and smart contracts ready and audited. We have hired 15 people by now, and I'm focusing on getting everyone running into the same direction. And yeah.
Now, before I continue, I'd love to share one of my favorite products in crypto with you. Now, whenever I want to trade a token, instead of going to Uniswap, SushiSwap, Bancor one by one to see where I can find the best quote, I just go to PARASWAP to scan for the best price anywhere, because PARASWAP aggregates all the popular Ethereum dexes and saves me a ton of time and headache in finding where I can trade something for the best price, and lets me trade in one place. Now, the cool thing is they've also integrated with Ledger Live as well, meaning I can now swap at the best prices directly from my Ledger wallet. So seriously, if you're a DeFi trader and you're worried about the security risks of centralized exchanges, but you also don't want to scour dozens of dexes just to find the best price, you have to check out PARASWAP. So head on over to paraswap.io/blockcrunch. I'd also love to take a moment to talk about the HBAR Foundation. Now, if you approached me 1 to 2 years ago, I would tell you I'm really skeptical of layer 1 systems outside of Ethereum. But in the past 12 months, I started to notice billions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of users flocking to new blockchains left and right. And then I realized there's an actual market gap being filled. And I always love to support projects who support builders. And one of those projects is Hedera Hashgraph. Hedera is an enterprise-grade public network with its own crypto asset called HBAR. And the HBAR Foundation has launched with an initial budget of over $2 billion to provide entrepreneurs with the funding and ecosystem support needed to quickly build and deploy new applications on the Hedera Hashgraph network. The HBAR Foundation is eager to find builders in DeFi, NFTs, gaming, sustainability, and all sectors. So if you are a builder, a developer, or a creator with an idea, visit hbarfoundation.org to learn more. I'd love to talk a little bit about Notional. If you followed the show for long enough, you know I'm pretty excited about fixed-rate products. Notional.Finance is the leading fixed-rate borrowing and lending protocol, and they've just released a major upgrade. With Notional, you can not only borrow and lend at fixed rates for up to 1 year now, but liquidity providers also have a pretty good opportunity. Thanks to an integration with Compound and a liquidity mining program, LPs can actually earn interest, liquidity fees, and token liquidity mining incentives as well. We've talked with Teddy from Notional recently, and as a happy investor as well, I've been pretty impressed with how the team is building this critical infrastructure that will help onboard the next billion users to DeFi. So you can check it out today at notional.finance/blockcrunch. Absolutely. Yeah, I can't agree more. The point about focusing is the key. There's so many distracting opportunities in a bull market that it's easy to kind of go after everything. And you did make a very interesting comment just now, Philip. We mentioned that there are many aggregators out there already. I personally actually was not aware that there are other cross-chain bridge aggregators out there. I'm curious about what that landscape looks like and how does Li.Finance differ from these other aggregators.
Yes, we do see a few coming up, and that's all in all a positive sign because it validates our problem. And we can separate these competitors in two ways. So a few of them are simply B2C oriented, while we are B2B, and a few others are having different value propositions. And as for the B2C side of things, I would say that in the long run, the B2C case is going to be dead, because we won't send users to bridges in order to go to other chains or dApps. All of that is going to be abstracted away at some point. So if you think long term, the B2C case is nothing sustainable. And for the different value propositions, they have good reasons to go for that. But with all the good ideas, it's about timing in the market, right? And we believe that what we are focusing on right now, which is purely B2B and very integration heavy, means we are focusing on the abstraction, and we are focusing on integration, and that's a good timing right now, and there's a real benefit for the whole ecosystem to grow up. And that integration marketing or integration oriented execution is something we have done in the past quite a lot with our past ventures. And there are so many things, from deployments to maintenance and requirements on all ends, you simply need experience with, and we have that in our team. And that's why I believe we have a very strong go-to-market strategy, and that's how we differentiate. And of course, we have some other things up our sleeves, but I can't talk about that right now.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And speaking of bridges, I think we've talked a lot about aggregating them, but we haven't dove into the actual bridges yet. So can you help us maybe break down the landscape of what are the main bridges out there, or what are the main types of bridges out there?
Okay, that's hard to answer without getting too technical. I would say there are bridges that are focused on generalized messaging. Optics, for example, allows that. And we have some that are just focusing on swaps. We see these being built quite often at the moment. Some examples are Connext, Hop, Cbridge, and they are focusing on atomic swaps. It's very easy to implement. It's not that complex. They are fast, they are cheap, and they definitely bring great benefits, but they also have some trade-offs somewhere else. And then we have, then in general, we can compare all these bridges based on latency, security, complexity, I would say generalized overhead, reusability. There's a great talk from James Presswich at EthCC in Paris. And highly recommend to watch that, who wants to dive deeper. In general, also worth mentioning is IBC. It's very fast and secure in theory, but it's very complex to implement. Cosmos is working on that, and it's yeah. We will see which of these technologies will get the most of the market share. I think Connext and Hop have the advantage that they are quite hyped at the moment, and because they are so fast, they are very user-friendly. Optics, for example, chooses many great trade-offs and is a little slower than Connext and Hop. So Optics takes a few hours to make a swap, but therefore they have more security. And then there are also some upcoming more even more user-oriented projects like Symbiosis, I would say, and Synapse, who's using wrapped assets. But yeah, that question is complex to answer. It's hard to just categorize them. You could also categorize them on certain security factors, like are they natively, externally, or locally verified. And all in all, there is no bridge without a trusted third party, and that's very important to know. And that's where people have to make trade-offs on all these mentioned categories. Quite complex answer, but it's a very difficult question.
Yeah, and just to kind of understand them a little bit better, what do you mean by a native bridge, and why is it so slow?
So again, quite a technical question. I'm referring to bridges that are using the chain's own validator set. So we are talking about on-chain validation. Quite often, we have a light client of chain A implemented in the in the virtual machine of chain B, and the other way around. And these two light clients are keeping track of each other, and they wait until transactions are confirmed, and they can do that without heavy computation, but it's still quite expensive, so they only do it every couple of hours, and yeah, that's what makes it so slow. They simply can't do it that often, and they need to wait until transactions are confirmed.
And with something like the L1 native bridges, like the Avalanche Bridge or the Neo Rainbow Bridge, do those fit under the native bridge definition too?
Yes, I would say so.
And you also spoke about Connext and Hop, these atomic swaps that I think a lot of people are really excited about. What is so special about how Connext does cross-chain transactions?
Connext and also Hop, they inherit the security of the base chains. And all in all, like if we take the factors we have mentioned a few minutes ago, they are low on complexity and low on latency. They are as trust minimized as they can be. As said, it always requires a trusted third party for any bridge. And yeah, where you have been asking specifically about Connext. It's a great team. They are very experienced. They have been working back then. I think they came from working on Plasma and then state channels. And then this year they switched from state channels to a more on-chain model. It's called NXTP. All in all, Connext understood quite early that it's very important to have capital efficiency, and Connext is doing a really great job on this. But I believe that all these bridging solutions, also Hop and so on, have great plans for the future, and they are all very early. So it's hard to pick any favorite. They're all gonna have a share of the market, which is incredibly huge for bridges, and yeah, I would say that's it.
Got it, got it. And finally, there's the synthetic bridges as well. Do you think there are certain things that a synthetic bridge maybe can't do that more native bridges or atomic bridges can do?
Yes, I think the ultimate limitation of a synthetic asset bridge is that it simply can't give me the asset I actually need on the destination chain. And that brings us to the next topic. That means I need to do another swap. So I need another liquidity pool on the destination chain. So while a synthetic asset bridge is maybe much more capital efficient, it takes that capital efficiency off the market. And that's just something we have to understand here. And also, it's prone to centralization, right? Because the wrapped asset is mainly bound to the bridge that's issuing that token. It has advantages and disadvantages. We have seen WBTC bringing good things to DeFi because now Bitcoin was of greater use. But yeah, as said, it has risks.
Got it. And you spoke about the trust assumptions as well, which I think is so important, right? So for me as a user, when I use an app that's plugged into Li.Finance, what are the assumptions that I'm making? Like, do I have to, what do I have to believe to be true for me to be, to feel safe about my experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, in general, we have to understand that there are no trustless approaches, right? So, we always have a trusted third party. We have bridges like the Rainbow Bridge that uses light clients on both sides. They are, so to say, optimistically trustless by using fraud-proof technologies. In general, we have that counterparty risk, so we need to make we are giving away our funds for some period of time, right? So we need to make sure that that the system has no code bugs, for example. But we also need to make sure that it's safe in a way that it deals correctly with malicious actors, right? So one factor here could be decentralization. So I need to make sure and trust that the system is decentralized enough so that it can overcome malicious actors. But then also there are other ways. So I would expect each actor to post collateral in order to be a validator, for example, of any kind, and get slashed as soon as I act maliciously. And all of these things are just assumptions, right? You can't inform yourself good enough before using each bridge. It's just too much, and you wouldn't want to do that for each chain-to-chain relation. And if you use Li.Finance, you can rest assured that we did our homework regarding that, and that we understand and actually try to measure as much as possible factors like decentralization. And we have two researchers working full-time with us that do nothing else than elaborating on these bridges. We're going to have a huge knowledge hub where we share all these information, compare bridges and all of that. So we're putting a lot of efforts into these things.
Yeah, and I definitely point our listeners towards that post that you referenced as well, written by Dimitri and 1KX, and I'll link that in the show notes below, because that has been one of the better breakdowns of different trust assumptions across bridges out there. So I think, yeah, I think now we have a pretty good idea of what the sector is like and how it breaks down. I'd love to zoom out a bit and really talk about the future of life finance. So at its maturity, say, I don't know how many years it is, maybe 3, 5, 10 years from now, what is the ideal vision for Li.Finance?
The vision for Li.Finance is to become the go-to solution for dApp developers when it comes to user onboarding. And user onboarding is ultimately enabled by liquidity flow, right? So yeah, we want to be the first thing you implement in your front end. We see that in software as a service and e-commerce as well, right? Liquidity flow enables these applications. So you have either implemented PayPal or Stripe to enable payments, and that enables their business. So dApps are also enabled by liquidity flow, and by making that as simple as possible so that users don't have to use a bridge, don't have to use a DEX or anything else, or they are actually all using that, but behind the scenes. That's what we aim to achieve and make as easy as possible for the dApp developer and as user-friendly as possible. And we have so many great ideas around making liquidity available on the spot directly, wherever they are, on which chain, on which dApp, doesn't matter. And we are really excited about that.
That makes a lot of sense. And I really like that analogy of Stripe for cross-chain bridges, because that feeds into my next question, which is something that comes up a lot for DEX aggregators. So we always ask the question, do we think the aggregators can extract value, or will the settlement layer, which is the DEXs themselves, be the ones who capture the most value? So I guess in this case, how do you think about value capture between the aggregator versus the bridges?
I'm not worrying too much about this. So for bridge versus bridge aggregation, as well as for DEX versus DEX aggregation, I would say as long as there's competition, aggregation makes sense. And I hope that there will always be competition, because we want this industry to continuously reinvent itself. We want to see progress. We want to make steps forwards on each level, right? And we are still quite early. So I think aggregation offers developers the opportunity to not having to think too much about whom to integrate. It makes it much easier to simply yeah, take off that decision making by implementing an aggregator than having to assess all the underlying solutions by yourself, and therefore having to opt in for one specific solution. And if we think about Web 2.0 here again, if you implement Stripe or PayPal, you don't care about the payment processing in the background, right? And yeah, it could be that bridges start connecting to all the DEXs themselves. So then DEX aggregators versus bridges would be one thing. But again, we have, for example, Anton from 1inch and also Munir from PARASWAP on our advisory board. So we talk with them quite often. And DEX aggregation alone is a lot of work. So I would rather say that there is value to capture for the DEX aggregator. There is also enough value to capture for the bridge, and it's always at some point it becomes a make or buy decision, right? So do you cooperate with the DEX aggregator, and you can outsource that part of the work, and the other way around, right? The DEX aggregator that wants to go cross-chain and be more interoperable with their other deployments, they would certainly at some point either build their own bridge or implement a bridge or a bridge aggregation protocol. And yeah, the company that moves forward the fastest is probably the one that cooperates. And it's I think there's enough room and volume for everyone, and there is a strong enough need for specialization. So we all gonna make it, so to say. And in the long run, especially for Li.Finance, we see us as a middle layer between DeFi infrastructure and the deprecation layer. So we are quite on top of the stack. So value capturing becomes harder for us, for example, but therefore we're gonna own the business relationship in the end, right? So we're gonna own the relationship to the upper layer, and that's where our business value comes from at some point. And by we believe that this space will see a lot more innovation coming up, and there will be more layers. And by abstracting all of that away, uh, I believe we are creating enough value, and it's what the business model is going to look like. We will see. There are plenty of opportunities, and yeah, I'm not worried at all.
Yeah, and the reason why I like that Stripe analogy is because there's a world where it seems like the aggregator and the underlying settlement layer are both profitable because Stripe obviously charges a fee, and then the settlement banks also charge a fee, and then it seems to work quite well. So I can
Yeah.
absolutely see that happening in crypto as well. And as we come to kind of the final part of this discussion here, can you just walk us through what are the biggest things on the pipeline right now, or what are the biggest things that you guys are focusing on Life Finance?
So right now for us, it's all about the launch. That means we're gonna launch a B2B website. What you see currently is our B2C oriented hackathon result from June from Hack Money, where we were one of the finalists. And we're gonna launch two products. The one is a complete on-chain solution. That means we offer that bridge aggregation completely on-chain for protocols like Yearn that then can expand their vault strategies, for example. And the other product is SDK driven because it not only uses a smart contract, but much more like OneInch and PARASWAP, it uses a smart routing backend that really finds the best route across all DEXs, DEX aggregators, and bridges. And these are the two products that are coming out quite soon. And we have plenty of integration partners lined up already, waiting for it, asking frequently for it. But we want to make sure that we get all these things right from A to B. So it's also about the whole processes around that, so that we can ensure a continuous product delivery and frequent release cycles. And yeah, that's what we are setting up right now, and a lot of things to do, definitely.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for this to be one of the first pieces of content that people will be able to access to learn more about Life Finance. So, for people who want to stay up to date with what you're working on and the progress for Life Finance, what are the best resources for them to use today?
Oh, that's easy right now. Just follow us on Twitter at Li-Fi Protocol. Join our Discord. The Discord is linked on our Twitter profile. And there's a waiting list for developers on our website, Li.Finance. Just join there if you're a developer and you're thinking about letting your users come from anywhere in order to use your dApp. Just get on the waiting list. It's quite long already, but we're going to get in touch with you as soon as possible. And apart from that, yeah, stay tuned. We're going to announce everything soon, and it's getting up to speed quite quickly.
Absolutely. I would definitely include those in the show notes below. So, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show, Philip. This has been really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me. That was definitely a nice experience. And yeah, I hope to see you in Lisbon.
Yeah, absolutely.